Macedonian Conquest. In the kingdom of Macedonia, which had been part of the Persian Empire at one time, a young king ascended to their throne in 336. Alexander, he had been tutored by a fellow Macedonian in his youth, Aristotle. The Macedonians were a Hellenized people, and that is, they spoke Greek and worshipped Greek gods, but had their own gods as well, which corresponded to the Greek divinities, for the Macedonians were not originally Greeks at all, but from another Indo-European stock, most likely related to the Thracians or Illyrians. Alexander was of two minds about the Persians. On one hand, he wanted to avenge Macedon and Greece on them and defeat them as the main cultural rivals of the Hellenic world. Yet on the other hand, he admired the Persians, as did many thinking Greeks, both for their philosophy and their proven ability to rule a vast empire. Alexander, in fact, consciously modeled himself and his ambitions on the accomplishments of Cyrus the Great. He learned these things from Xenophon's book about Cyrus entitled Cryopedia, written about 370 BCE. First, Alexander subdued all Greek city-states, then marched into the Persian Empire and defeated the Persian army under Darius III at Issus, and then moved on to conquer Egypt, removing it and its resources from the Persian Empire. Then he moved further east into the empire, defeating the Persians in the Battle of Gaugamela. In 331, Darius fled to the eastern part of the empire and was later assassinated by the head of his personal guard, Bessus. Alexander occupied Persepolis and was crowned Persian emperor. Persepolis was destroyed to avenge the sacking of Athens. The Macedonian leader then visited the tomb of his hero Cyrus at Pasargadae. He found it had been looted of its riches by the Greeks. Alexander's megalomaniacal plan was to unify the Greek and Persian aristocracies and to form a ruling race of men. He arranged marriages for his men to Persian women, and he himself took at least 2 Persian brides. In general, Persian court ritual was adopted by the Macedonians, and the process of Persianization had begun. Alexander unexpectedly died at the age of 33 after a bout of heavy drinking. The empire of the Persians had been effectively conquered by this Macedonian king. Due to a combination of inner turmoil in Persian coupled with military and visionary genius of Alexander, history calls him great. But he was not great in the same way as Cyrus. Alexander's was a soul of violence and excess, which often clouded his judgment. Upon his death, the empire, now called the Seleucid Empire, was divided into satrapies. Generally, at first ruled by Macedonian generals, Greek replaced Aramaic as the language of commerce and government. In the cities and along the trade routes, Greek and Persian ideas mingled. Yet in the countryside, and especially in the mountains of Zoroastrian faith, continued uninterrupted. A word should be said about language in the Persian Empire. There was in Iran, as in other Indo-European cultures, a culture-traditional disdain for the written word. Real knowledge was something that was learned orally from a master to pupil and memorized. This was true from India to Ireland, and it was first, no less, true in Iran. The ancient Zoroastrian texts were not written at first, but memorized. Writing was used for various purposes, e.g. records, governmental policies, laws, and decrees, and modified form of cuneiform. Writing was used for short inscriptions in Old Persian. For example, however, in general, other languages were used for writing, especially Elamite and Aramaic. After Alexander, Greek was used for centuries. But the oral tradition continued unaltered through these centuries. Later, in the time of the Sasanian Empire, 224 through 651 CE, new alphabets were developed to commit both Avestan, sacred hymns, and their translation and commentaries, along with other sacred works in the contemporary language of Pahlavi. This commitment to writing had some of the negative effects that the wise ancients had predicted. The people became increasingly dependent on the written word, and when the books were later partially destroyed and lost, so too was the knowledge lost and fragmented. However, without this written record, all would have eventually been lost as. The Macedonians ruled Persia for about a century, but Their court was largely Persianized fairly quickly as a result of the Persian ideas penetrating into the West through Greece far more than the Western ideas did so in Iran. The imperial ideas spread to Greece, then to Rome. Most historical accounts we have of Alexander were written by Greeks and later Romans, who idolized him. The Persians generally had a more negative and realistic view of him as a brute, tyrant, and practitioner of every excess. Later Persians texts would call him Gulzastar, the accursed.